Hello, and welcome back to another week of the DP World Tour picks and bets. Skylar, Hoke here. Tom, I would say it's an exciting day because I'm very happy and feel validated on our thought process on Yannick Paul.
Yeah.
Great player, incredible 18th hole. What a putt to seal it around. I guess I would say the car crashes, the train wrecks that also seem to happen on
Yeah,
the back nine.
yeah.
But Yannick pulled it together and really finished strong, and we've been validated. And the thing that stinks about when a player has a season like that is their odds are lower than what you want, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't end up betting him, but man, it was good to see Yannick come through. Whether or not we had bet him, big week for him.
I think I think when he shot that kind of 64, 62 over the Friday and Saturday, I was a bit like, wow, this was we said it right. Like, we said, like, he could definitely do this. Like, he could go and win by like 5 or 6 strokes, and he made hard work of it on Sunday in the end. And Marcus Armitage probably should have won, right? But it's it's just one of those things. Like, I mean, Jason, who's on a great run at the moment on the podcast, obviously put him
Absolutely.
up, and he did the similar thing with Callum Shinkwin earlier in the season, where like he was 20 to 1, and I think we probably said the same thing. Like, or I definitely did. Like, I just can't bet Cameron Shinkwin at 20 to 1. If he wins, he wins. And you do have to have a cut-off point, right? Like you said at the start there, like, because of the season he had, this is going to happen. It was probably last chance saloon before a field. Well, obviously you got this week now, but like last real time where you're going to get any sort of chance in beating a weaker field. The prices comes in because of that, and you just have to, like, if you just keep backing people off at the cliff, then um, that's funny with us with the people that we back, right? But like, you do just have to have a cut-off point, and I don't feel too bad about it. I feel like we tracked the right player for a good period of the season, and that was it. I think you have been vindicated with your Guido Migliozzi. I think with Oliver Wilson's win, like, we kind of talked about him quite a bit. Waring's been in great form. Yannick Paul winning. So, I think we've been on the right players all season long. Really, it's just, are we doing it in the right weeks? No, at the moment. But I think a lot of the time that's not our fault. Like, Nikolai Højgaard was excellent on Sunday tees green and just could not find a putt. And this happens, especially on DP World Tour Sundays.
Oh, 100%. Yep. I mean, it's the biggest roller coaster that you get every week in golf, and it's you hope you get in the right situation more often than not, and that's not easy to do. But yeah, Jason, incredible run for
Yeah,
for him right now. It's awesome to see. Love Jason, so good for him and good for Yannick. I think that was just widely celebrated as somebody kind of we've all kind of tracked, and this. I guess this week as well, I would view as another big opportunity. I would echo similar kind of comments in which we said, it's a big week for people that need to earn their cards. It's also a big week for people that are going to really like change their season as a whole, and get themselves in a good place for the race to Dubai playoffs, right? So, not the strongest field that we have at the Portugal Masters, but kind of run of the mill of what we've been seeing. And you do have to plug your nose, and maybe we're more apt to bet these guys after
yeah,
missing out. We're going to kind of hold true to who we believe in this week, and a really straightforward test, I would say, when it comes to the golf course, right? We've seen, Don Pedro for quite some time, right? And, we've seen a habitual track record of bombers and good putters playing well. Like, you can bring it back where Peters, being the last winner there. You have Højgaard in the mix. You have Bjergård being a winner. You're going to mention another two-time winner. You have Kutsia the year before with Laurie Cantor. Lucas Herbert is in a runner-up finish. There's just a track record here that it's nice because we can really kind of narrow down the pool of who potentially we are going to bet. And if we are going to go outside of that, maybe we find somebody, on a number or a specific run that we like. But any other course thoughts when you look at the Portugal Masters?
No, I mean, look, I think you covered it. Like, if you look at the fact that Nikolai Højgaard and Lucas Bjerregaard were seconds to Thomas Peters last year, Kosir beats Cantor. Stephen Brown, I think, hits it a decent way as well over Brandon Stone. Tom Lewis over Lucas Herbert. You suddenly see a very clear pattern, right? And I think even Tom Lewis as a two-time winner was probably a decently long hitter at the time, especially in 2011. So, um, do you have to have distance up? No, I don't. I don't think you do. I just think it's a huge advantage. I think it's one of those weeks where you can just you can let go off the tee, and we see it just doesn't get punished. A little bit like a lot of PJ Tour events, right? So um, I do think it will be beneficial, obviously, to find fairways like it is every other week, but I think you can just get away with it, and I think that will free certainly my first selection up based on that.
Yeah. Yep. I definitely agree with you. And we have kind of a clear 1-2 in the odds boards with Robert McIntyre and Jordan Smith teeing it up again. I don't think we have anything more to say than with those two golfers. I mean, you have to birdie in bunches here for sure. Birdie making is it, and well deserved front of the class. Peters did have to withdraw with their second child being born or going into labor soon. So Peters has had that field there. But it's a really interesting mix of golfers that you do see kind of continuing to be priced lower and jammed in. I mean, Yannick's 25 now at DraftKings Sportsbook. You have Rosner 22, Victor Perez 20, Højgaard longest he is 22. It's definitely jamming in some guys that are coming in with more form that well, it couldn't have been that long ago that we were getting 40s, 50s, 60s,
I mean,
70s on
look,
a lot of these guys, right?
like last week we went with Nikolai Højgaard because he was 40, 45, 50, right? And to be honest, I don't think the 20 to 1 is too bad on him, even though I haven't gone there because he was second last year. I think he played it 2 years ago as maybe even as an amateur then. He's certainly either an amateur or just starting out, and yes, he only just made the cut. But like, just the fact he opened with 67, shot 67, 64 over the weekend last year, just what he did last week. He seems like the type that can probably just brush off what happened on Sunday pretty quickly. He was definitely visibly frustrated on Sunday, and my God, shouldn't he have been when he couldn't make a putt? But it's yeah, I think statistically he didn't actually stand out great tee to green last week. Like he was actually way down the field, but it felt like he played a lot better than that. And I think just some of the shots, like the one that went in the bunker, was a lot better than it looks and stuff like that. So I think sometimes when you're following a player and watching them, it's so much different. We are very statistical and look at stats a lot, but like sometimes you do have to just watch the event and realize actually Nikolai Højgaard played pretty well on Sunday.
Yeah, and how big of a difference to the green is your shot on 11, right? When he's a foot short of the
Exactly.
green and he's flagged it, maybe he's 3 feet for eagle,
Yeah.
or he's in the bunker, right? I mean, that's probably a stroke over a stroke in approach right
Yeah.
there, right? On one hole. That if you're
And
not watching or following along with your tweets or tracking it, like even tracking it, you don't know, right? Like that's the eye test on it.
so I think Drew Matthews does this on. He kind of has a stat where it's kind of takes out the isolated like one really bad shot, and if it's in extremes or what's happened on the field, etc., then you kind of take that out. And I don't pretend to know how he does that or anything like that, but I think that's a pretty unique way of looking at things. And I think actually that's something that we can learn, which it's impossible. You can't track 156 players every week and realize how well they're playing. You don't see all the coverage, but if you're in, what I would say is if you are into a player, do you get the Bet365 shot tracker over there?
We do.
Yeah.
I live on that thing, and I've been
So
begging Drew to figure out a way if we can get it on the Europe side because there's the data isn't as easy accessible, right? Like
yeah,
that's if we could get the anybody that's listening,
yeah,
a way to put 365 inputs into an output of like Excel or something that I could get hands on, slide to the DMs. Would love to discuss because yeah, I think being able to parse through that data a lot more is like Drew and I we because I worked with Drew since like 18 or 19 when we kind of started fantasy
yeah,
golf bagger. He had started it, came on board. And one of the data things we did was like we call it the extended approach data, where you put a shot inside of 6 feet and you see how often golfers are able to put shots inside of 6, 12, 18 feet and Fantasy National has done that with like opportunities gained. I think they use
yeah,
15 feet as their stat. But like you have that on the Euro side because even though it's very variable, you could see that Nikolai Højgaard had, 6 chances inside of 12 feet on Sunday, right?
yeah,
And that's the highest percent, even if he might have shanked an iron and threw things off, right? Like that type of statistical analysis is needed to really drive things home, in my opinion, on the European side. But I guess shot tracker is better than what it used to be. So
Yeah, and I think you've just got to. My sort of word of advice would be if there's a player that not even necessarily you're betting on that week, but you have in mind for next week, or you just want to track their progress. Just watch them, on a shot tracker for Saturday, Sunday. Just while you're doing other things, just put their kind of shot by shots in, and you can sort of see how they're playing. Like, if you see people going to 12, 15, 16, 17 feet and they're not making birdies, and that's fine. Like they're hitting the ball really well. And most of the time it does show up in strokes gained approach and tee screen. If someone's hitting it well, it does show up, but round by round can get very tricky.
so that's a long way in saying our betting cards are starting a little bit deeper down the board,
They are,
right?
yes, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
That's a very long way of saying that we're not quite going to Nikolai Højgaard, but I can understand why people would. Um,
Yes.
I believe
Um,
I've probably got the shortest price golfer of our this week.
yes. Yes. That's going to be your, let's see, what's the best price you get there? I guess there is a 35 to 1 on DraftKings Sportsbook
Wow.
for the Eddie Pepperell still.
So I think that's a really, really good price. He's only 22 to 1 over here. So that's a
Yeah.
huge difference. And I'm always intrigued as to why that's such a big difference in DraftKings as opposed
And
to
DraftKings is the best in the market by 10 points. 25 to 1 is the
so
other ones out there. So that's a
so
really good price.
hit DraftKings, right? Because I think that's a wild price. Like at some point, I mean, this isn't news. We've been talking about this every week, but the last 8 of his last 10 events, he's been inside the top 10 in strokes gained approach. 6 of those times he's been inside the top 3, and twice he's led the field. So there's literally no. We can talk about Rosners and Jordan Smiths and all those types of people. No one is hitting their irons anywhere near as well as Eddie Pepperell. His driver is a problem, and it has been a problem, but this golf course allows him to get away with that to an extent. He's got second, third, and sixth place finishes here in his last 4 starts at the golf course at Don Pedro. He was the 36-hole leader here in 2018 and finished 3 shots adrift of Tom Lewis in second. Um, Over the past 15 weeks, he's played 10 events and he's made the weekend every time and finished no worse than 32nd. He hasn't, you know, been in contention since finishing just behind Sean Crocker at the Hero, but he was so good that day. Like, Crocker just wasn't going to get beat, but he was so good, and I took a lot from that. And whilst I haven't gone back to him because the prices have been too short, and there's been other players in the field I wanted to bet, like I think this is really his. Like, if he doesn't take this opportunity this week, I can see it being a long time before Pepperell contends again because this feels like it's all shaping up really nicely for him.
Yeah. No, I mean, it would be great to see Eddie get over the line. And yeah, I think it's like a validation of his season. I would feel similar to Yannick in regards to the way we track and saw out of, him for the year. So I can see it rooting for Eddie, and this ball striking continued last week. Um, this next player for me is like the epitome of uh, standing true into like a golfer that I think fits the course very well. He's just historically has shown that he's played quite good golf around Don Pedro, and he fits that bill. I think he is, man, he might be pound for pound the best putter on the DP World Tour, and I think he got a birdie in bunches here. And what really stood out in my research of it overall, and it makes sense with how well he's played, and maybe it makes sense even more why he plays so well on links golf, is Joaquim Lagerin is longer than what you give him credit for. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
he led the field in distance on Sunday this past week. He's out here continuing to be in the positive in distance, almost week in and week out on the field. And even when he's missing cuts, he is gaining strokes on the field putting, and not many people are able to do that for the game. So that shows that approach and around the green probably don't sniff what it needs to be. But the distance factor with the birdies factor in a great, a second coming off second last time out. I guess he led the field Sunday because Valderrama was the last time out was when he was
yeah,
second. And then 23rd at the Open de España. And he did that being positive off the tee and being positive putting. And I think that's the success you got to bring to this week. And he's 40 to 1. He's been chopped, right? Like, I don't know where he opened. We're doing the show on Tuesday, this week. And this is a definitely shorter price than what you probably talked to Liger and Alfred Dunhill links at triple digits, right?
yeah.
And that's from history perspective, but he's 40s almost everywhere, DraftKings specifically, and I'm still going in because I think that is the kind of like game you need, and it just fits everything I'm looking from a trend perspective. So he's where I start.
He actually opened up at 40 to 1 over here in most spots. Like he actually
Yeah,
went from 40 to 28 pretty quickly in places. 45 was the biggest number, and it wasn't like the most place terms you normally get over here. So,
just
um,
odd pricing, right? Like probably something where most people are completely put off.
and I think the thing is with Lagergren so many people have been burnt with him. Like he'll go and play well at 200 to 1, and you think, okay, right, he's rounding into some form, goes to 33, 40 to 1, 50 to 1, which does happen fairly often with Lagergren, and he just shits a bed. Like there's no
Yep.
two ways of putting it, right. And I don't necessarily think that's going to happen this week, just because of what you said, like just how suitable the golf course is. But if anything summarizes Lagergren's career today, it's actually his record here at Don Pedro. So he's finished third, 14th, and 17th, and missed three cuts. So makes the weekend, he's there. And I think that's actually the story of his career. Like if he gets through a cut, he generally either climbs or stays where he was at the start of the week. Um, so yeah, I really like Lundgren. I think there's definitely a lot to like. Even when he missed a cut on debut, he actually opened up with 68 and was inside the top 10 and just shot second round 76. He missed a cut 3 years later, opened up with 78 and shot a second round 66. And then it was 1 year before finishing 14th, so 2018 I think it was, where he did actually have a bad 2 days. But twice then he's bounced back from or had one good round when missing the cut. So I think to me Lagergren makes it perfect sense. And I can certainly see him if he goes with a bit of a middling round of 68, 69 on Thursday, he might catch fire on Friday. So maybe even someone that you could do in running as well.
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely excited about him, and will plug my nose and still go in on the price. I'll stay with two golfers here. I'll just kind of knock both out. And again, there's a great thing about doing a show on Tuesday. There's a bad thing about doing a show on Tuesday. And if you're not in before the tipsters and you're not in before guys that seem popular this week, those prices, excuse me, are going to crash. But with good reason. And there's two of them that specifically stand out. And I'm not going to let that 80 to 50 movement, even though it is significant. It is absolutely significant. But I'm viewing this field as almost a bet who you want field. And I'm not going into this week without Tapio Pokinen and Gavin Green on my card. And it's just simple, right? And it's simple in the fact that their overall arching games are distance and putting. Like that is what it is. But we have seen both of them get themselves in the mix multiple times. I feel like this year has been such a step up for both of those two golfers where I mean, you could almost put it on the wall that Gavin Green, even though he would pull like the Keegan, right? He would be first round leader and then miss the cut. He
Yeah,
would he would like be nowhere near in the mix. And he's found himself multiple times this season, right? Like giving himself, I mean, 11th place last week. He had the second at the Czech Masters where he probably should have won. He finally was back positive with the irons last week. And he lost putting. I mean, he lost putting, I believe, and still finished 11th last week. That's a big thing for Gavin Green. And then Tapio. Tapio did miss the cut at Valderrama. That's completely, we can throw that out of the water. But you look before that stretch there, he had 5 events, 4 of those events inside the top 30, that third at the Czech Masters, had a great opening to the year as well. I mean, I just think if you're coming to us and we're the only show you listen to, that is the description on why they're being incredibly bet
yeah.
this week. Green had a 17th place here. Last year's tie with actually Tapio. Tapio hasn't missed a cut here before. So it's not an overwhelming amount of course history that goes in it. It's just the profile of the year they've had and the way they fit Don Pedro.
Yeah, and I think you look at Gavin Green. I mean, he actually sort of started well last week and faded, and that actually lines up brilliantly with his putting. So he gained 0.8 shots on both rounds in terms of putting, 38th and 40th in putting the first 2 days, which is not great, but it's good enough. And then he was just 67th and 51st on the weekend. So he is just that type of guy that if he has middling putting rounds he can get through, and he just needs to have 4 of them, right? And I think that as much as course form is course history, and he's played here twice, he missed the cut once, but he's been here twice, and I like that. I like Portland has actually got better every single time he's played here. So 63rd,
Yes.
40th, 36, 17. So it's a really nice trending form here, which sort of suggests that, especially with someone like Portland, because he has to sort of rein in what he does, right? Like he's just one of those guys that hits it really far and makes a bunch of putts and birdies, right? And he does have to control that. And I think when you learn the nuances of a golf course that allow you to do that, and you've been there a few times, he could, definitely kick on. And I think Ben Coley might have tweeted out something about um, like some amateurs playing here in the past. Or not here, maybe at Valderrama or something, that they've then gone on and played really well at the Portugal Masters. So that might be another significant factor as well. I would need to reread the tweet to completely remember exactly what it was that he said. Here we go. So impossible to place a value on amateur form at the same course he's played in the pro game, but there were 74 players at Villamora for a team event in 2011. Fewer than 25 have made it onto the tour. So 25 of the 74 made it onto the tour, and they've combined to win 5 of the 11 editions of the Portugal Masters.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
basically, like, and he helped everyone out and sort of said, if you're working through your own shortlist and this sort of stuff, here are the names that could be the sixth player to do it: Porkinen, Nemeth, Julian Brun, Ricardo Gouvier, Tobias Figueroa, Pedro Figueroa, sorry, Nacho Vera, Dan Heising, Jack Senior, Sebastian Soderberg, David Law, Francesco Laporta, and Oliver Farr. So it's a hell of a list. Like, it's a lot of players, and that covers a wide range of prices. But interesting, I thought that Porkinen was on there. I thought that was worth relaying.
Yeah, no, more power to it. I'm going to toss it to you as a golfer. I know that you said it's a little bit, I guess, backwards to the thinking but the price is quite low, and it bet down quickly due to some uh, projections, I would say. But talk us why you think it could be a Nicholas Norgard Moeller week.
Yeah, I just think that for me, there's a lot of upside on Nicholas Norgard, and I think we've sort of said this a couple of times. We don't necessarily know what he is yet, and I like the little bit of mystery about him. Like, he shot a second round 61 at Crans not so long ago and finished 29th there. He finished 50th at the Italian Open, but shot a second round 65. He finished 7th at the Dunhill Links, Open with a 63, and I actually thought he was quite impressive on the final day until he wasn't, like right at the very end. And then at the Open de España, which I wouldn't necessarily have put in his wheelhouse, he was inside the top 20 all week. So really, he's missed cuts at Valderrama, he's missed a cut at the French Open, he's missed a cut at Himmerland, which is a little bit of a disappointment, but he opened with a 65 there and then shot a 77. So I think for me, he's just got that volatility that I like on a golf course like this. I think he's a huge driver of the golf ball. Everyone sort of says that. He's a bit of a monster. Um, hasn't played the golf course, so we don't actually know what he's going to be like. But sort of mentioned earlier that the kind of list of names that have played well at this golf course, and there was a lot of Danish sort of flair on that. And I don't think you can just say, right, he's Danish and he hits the ball fast, so let's kind of shoehorn him in. But when you look at last year, Lucas Bjerregaard out of nowhere really, and Nicolai Højgaard was second. Bjerregaard's obviously won the event before in the past as well. To me, that kind of suggests that he can follow suit. I don't know if he's quite good enough to win, which is why I'm a little bit hesitant of whether to back him or not. But I do think he's certainly worth considering, especially for like drafting and things like that.
Yep, yep, absolutely hits it at absolute mile. Um, I'm thinking here in this range is where is it 3 down. So you mentioned Nemec, right? Like I'm kind of in the fence on where I feel on him this week. I actually thought he was a little bit more of a power golfer. It's a little bit lighter than on distance than I loved. The ninth and 11th, basically out of nowhere, right? Like he didn't. What I did like is if I remember, Ras Al Khaimah was a similar type of course, right, where it was very driver heavy, very
Yeah,
birdie base. So I'm going to come in here because I want to add one more at our end time that we haven't discussed yet, but it's a really long shot. So I'm going to still go in confidence with Nemec, right? Puts it well. When he puts it well, I mean he competes, and I think that's just kind of the name of the game on what he has done. Now, does he love it in Spain? He might. His best 3 finishes basically of the year are in Spain. But we've seen him pop in the year. Early on in the year, he was incredible with the driver, and it's just a combination of above average distance and really good accuracy. But he can putt with the best of them. I think Nemec's price now, let's see where he's still at 80s. I think 80s is very fair to not write somebody off like that because it has been a 2 week jump. But he's been somebody we've been very keen on in spots like this in the past. So I'm definitely willing to stay on course there and bet Lucas Nemec.
yeah. I think he's just someone that you probably just take a chance on when he's in the form, right? And If it doesn't
Yeah.
happen, it doesn't happen. But like you said, he was third there behind Nikolai Højgaard, behind Jordan Smith, who were the two kind of favourites for this. Interestingly enough, Tapio Pulkkinen was seventh that week.
And
Matthew
that course
Pavon,
was all distance. It
yeah,
was like,
Matthew Pavon, who's one of the favourites, which actually, Matthew Pavon's really interesting because Brad put him up on the podcast,
yeah,
and but when we were sort of going through it, like he's actually one spot directly above Antoine Rosner in the DP World Tour rankings, and I think that's gone overlooked because we always talk about Rosner as like he's this ball striking machine who, when he puts, he's going to win, and we don't really talk too much about Matthew Pavon. And I know that's because he's been kind of priced low compared to the kind of golfer he is, but I think his season's gone overlooked slightly. So when you look at the fact that he was third here, Nemeth was third at Ras Al Khaimah, Nikolai Højgaard won, you certainly get a pretty clear picture. So I would definitely go back to looking at that Ras Al Khaimah Championship form back in February. I don't know if it's necessarily the same type of course, but I think you get the same sort of players, and I think that's a really good point by yourself. So I think we've sort of jumped over his price a little bit. I want to circle back to Tom Lewis.
yes, yeah, I realized.
It,
Yep.
yeah, he to me, it's a little bit of the Yannick Paul factor. Like I don't want to miss out on Tom Lewis's comeback win rather than Yannick Paul's first win. I think this is obviously a comeback for Tom Lewis, and I like really and truly, he's probably in the third stage of his career already, Tom Lewis, which is wild considering he's 31 years old. But like, he came out as an amateur really, really quickly and played well at the Open Championship in 2011. Wins the Portugal Masters that year, shooting 21 under and beating Cabrera Bello. So that's a huge start to life on the DP World Tour or then the European Tour. Comes back 7 years later, wins it again by 3 strokes over Lucas Herbert and Eddie Pepperell, which is a really big scalp when you look back in, that's aged really well, that win. Shot a third round 61 to back up a 63 on Friday. And that's a really hard thing to do. Like, he opened with a 72 that week and went 63, 61, 66. Like that's a wild card. And then you go back to the Corn Ferry Tour Championship in 2019, opens 68 and then shoots 3 rounds of 66 and it's pretty wild. So I think he's just the sort of person that can really put his foot down. He won by 5 strokes on the Challenge Tour in 2018. Like he just motors home when he's on. Is he playing quite to that level? Probably not. But he's been really encouraging since he came back to the DP World Tour. So I mentioned I literally said, I think it was a Czech Masters, I put him straight up because I said I was really pleased by the fact that he was coming back to move to England and really dedicate himself to the DP World Tour. It's kind of been forced upon him, right? Because it didn't go the way he wanted it to go on the Corn Ferry Tour, or effectively the PGA Tour is what he wanted to do. But 13th for the Czech Masters, 12th in Himmerland. When he was 12th in Himmerland, he was 4th going into the weekend and 6th going into the final day. At the Italian Open, he was 3rd after 36 holes and finished 16th, which is a disappointing drop-off. But did he play with Rory McIlroy that weekend?
Believe that on that Saturday, right? And that's
So
when he like had an awful front nine and a really good back nine.
So I think that can throw anybody off, right? Like if you're trying to prove who you are, and I think Tom Lewis is a player that is very confident in his abilities. As if he was to speak to you, he'd be very cocky and a bit arrogant, but must have some sort of demon somewhere because he doesn't seem to be able to string it together. But even like when he finished 50th in France, he was 12th going into the final round, and 37th last week's not great, but it's definitely a good warm up. And you look here, win, 8th. It's basically a last chance saloon for Tom Lewis this week because he has to. I don't know if he has to win Sky to get into his card, but he'd certainly have to be top 2 or 3. I don't think he could do anything else. So I think really he needs to go in thinking I need to win. He put up on his Instagram, "Can I make it 3 this week?" Like he's very bullish. He normally is. It's amazing to think how far he's gone. Like I think of him and I think of people like Oliver Fisher who have kind of gone through peaks and troughs in their careers, had big amateur careers, and come out and had instant success. But like to me, like he had that 30th place finish on the Open Championship, finished 10th the following start, and then won 2 starts later. Like, that's a really huge way to capitalise on a good performance as an amateur. Right? Like we mentioned like Filippo Celli and stuff like that, who were the low amateurs and they don't really kick on. That was massive. And yes, it's taken him a little while to discover it, but I think if he comes back, dedicates himself to this tour, he can probably win with a decent clip. So is it St Jude? I think it was the FedEx event where WGC FedEx event where he shot that
Finished second.
Yeah, shot 60 or
62,
61.
62 on the weekend, right?
Wild, and that's just what he does. And it's third at the Saudi, third in Dubai, third at Dunhill Links. He's so good, and I think we're still yet to actually see the full Tom Lewis package. So coming back to a golf course that he loves, I think at 50 to 1, he's a great price.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can almost, you could say like Peters, like for instance, right? You come up on the European tour, you give it a shot on the PGA tour, you give something that just doesn't work out like you thought it would. You come back and after a couple of years of figuring it out, you're back to a world class player in that sense, right? Like that's the trajectory you'd like to see out of Lewis in that manner.
He strikes me as someone that just gets distracted like pretty easily. Like I
Yeah.
think he enjoys the lifestyle of being well off and well supported, and I think he's been supported by Nike for a long time, where he hasn't probably had to worry about sponsorships and giving up cars and stuff. He's never really had to struggle, and I think that probably surprised him when he did. And now he's got his back against the wall, and I think that could be a really good spot for him.
Yeah. Absolutely. You brought up Chelly. People might be asking if you're going back to Alex Fitzpatrick, both of us. I think there's intrigue there. When I woke up Thursday morning, kid's in first place, right? Like I'm like, gosh, this is happening. And then he couldn't have gone worse than what it really did. The final like 27 holes, him missing the cut. Um, all eyes still for me there. I think he's super exciting. I think I'm just going to let it kind of go.
I think he needs
For
tougher than this
Yeah,
probably.
he's not sure on that short game, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because again, he actually needs to get his status, and this is probably his last shot. I know he's going to get spot starts and stuff, but you never want to be in that position. Like you want to. I'm guessing he's going to go to Q school and things like that. But
Yeah, I'm thinking. So Q school is next week, second stage, I believe. Um, yeah, I believe second stage Q school is next week. So I think guys that are a little bit down the list on the race to Dubai will get exempt into the second Q school, if not final stage,
yeah,
right? Um, so you might see some of these familiar faces team up in the four Q second stages that are deeper down the list. But there's definitely some names that need to get some status for next year. And I think I'll go into, let's see, I have three left. We okay. I got perfect. Okay, so I'll go into, I guess, my next selection, and this is another one where kind of a gut. It's kind of a gut like bat call for me. And the price isn't as good again as what you might think it could potentially be. Um, but I really think there is something out there in the game right now for Mike Lorenzo Vera, and people are probably saying where, like where are you seeing anything like this? And it was a string of miscuts, right? We had a 13th at the Scandinavian Mix back in June. He made the cut the next week, and then he basically put together an awful stretch. He's had an awful year, right? He's cracked inside the top 20 twice. 2021, terrible. You know, the last time this guy is top five in the event was Dubai in December of 20, where he almost won that event. But I mean, if we think of the Mike Lorenzo Vera of old, the guy was one of the best putters we've seen, right? Like he was incredible on the greens. You can vividly remember that first round lead, right, at Harding Park that he had. Like he just he couldn't win. He was a golfer that he was probably the best golfer on tour on the DP World Tour at the time that just didn't
for a
have a
long
win.
time. Yeah,
Correct, right? And that's fallen off the map. And you've mentioned this to me a couple times. He's been very vocal about how he does not stand for live, right? And thinks it's just no place in the game of golf. And does he have a game to back it up? I think there's been life. And I mentioned, I think it was at the Open Days Fund, he had two rounds, a closing round, and I think it was the opening round that kind of showed a little bit of form there. But what I loved last week, again, when you kind of sent out some calls in the Open Days Fund, Mallorca, top 20, his best finish in quite some time again here. And we have that with him leading the field tee to green on Sunday. Lorenzo Vera's in that same spot as Lewis, right? Like, what are these guys doing? Like, I mean, does Lorenzo Vera maybe have exemptions from the amount of starts he might have had? I don't know. I'm not
yeah.
fully up to speed on the same way they do that on the tour side, but he's underneath. He's going to be going back to Q school, right? And like, you see that at 37 years old and somebody who's been through a lot. He's been vocal about how he blew his money, right? And then he came back. Like, this is a big life change if he's sitting here, playing challenge tour events or I don't know what's next for Lorenzo Vera, but a win, or contention at 150 to 1, I could see it, man. I could really see it with the way the game has been rolling for him secretly and kind of sneaky overall. So I think 150 is there for me. I would be kicking myself because I think he's just been popping in a way most people haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot to be said there, and my point with I mean, there's two players that have been really vocal on the DP World Tour about Liv, and one's Eddie Pepperell and one's Lorenzo
Yeah,
Vera, right? And I think that it can be a distraction to Pepperell, and I would worry that that can impact him because once he starts getting on Twitter, he gets a bit carried away. And Lorenzo Vera, I think it's actually probably good for him because he's doing it and improving since he said it, as opposed to being at the top of his game, what to be able to say it and then sort of getting distracted. So I don't think it's necessarily too much of an impact, but I do think it's now time to dig it out of the dirt and get a result. But just to just to quickly circle back to the rankings a little bit, like 100 top 117 is the provisional cutoff for the DP World Tour membership.
yep.
Jonah Watson has been playing really well. He's 116th. Sebastian Garcia Rodriguez is in 117th right now. Darius Van Drill dropped by 1 to 118th last week,
He was in the mix on Sunday. That 30th
right?
place
And
finish
and it
was tough because he could have placed for us.
and that's tough. Then you've got Ricardo Gouvier, who played well last week, who was a couple of shots out of placing,
He's
120th.
probably the third most tipped guy this week, right?
Yeah,
Because you get the home narrative. Yeah.
yeah. And then like Paratore, Laporta, David Horsey, Lacroix. Some of these players aren't actually playing, but like these are the people that are around this list. And interestingly enough, when we go into our final pick that we agree on, like I was actually surprised how high up he was in the rankings because I assumed he would be in a similar spot. But yeah, I just think it's interesting, especially with someone like Jenna Watson on, who's been playing really well. Like he's
Yeah.
right on that bubble. So someone like him at 80 to 1, Jeff Windsor I looked at 80 to 1, who's not in the kind of danger, obviously, but I do think he's kind of interesting. But those are the kind of names I thought about around this kind of price.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Before you go into your last pick, we're on this together. I got one more to follow. Want to make sure give a shout out to any of our audio listeners. You can find us at Daily Fantasy Sports Picks and Bets, the Mix, available Mayo Media Network all across those different platforms that you can find us via podcast. And again, YouTube, if you're listening on us, we thank you. Appreciate your support. Like, subscribe to our Mayo Media Network channel. Leave a comment. We just love the support. It goes a really long way for us here at the network, especially as football is kicking like crazy. I know how busy Pat is with everything and all the different niche sports that are going up on the mix. So appreciate you guys. And with that, Tom, can you explain why we're going to hit 151 winner together?
This is our favourite type of bet, right? And just to echo what you kind of said, about kind of Pat and the network, right? Like, what we do at Mayo Media Network is massive, and I say we because I feel like we all feel a small part of what is a really big process. So kudos to Pat who kind of pumps out the content and leads from the front. Mark Warren, 150 to 1 is. I remember one of my friends. Loves betting Mark Warren, and he has done for probably 10 years since we kind of left school. And I've always found it a bit bizarre because he's one of those guys that had that little bit of a moniker of he should have won a little bit more, didn't really get the job done, didn't get over the line. And then he went from that really solid player who was always in the mix and not getting it done to just not being in the mix anymore. So he won in 2006, won in 2007, won in 2014. Then he wins again in 2020, which I think was the first event back after COVID. Was it the Austrian
Yep.
Grand Prix?
July 12th, Austrian Open.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he beats Marcel Schneider that week, who's another guy that I thought was interesting for this week. He's also lost in a playoff at Wentworth. He's played in World Cups with Colin Montgomery for Scotland. He's won 3 times on the Challenge Tour. One of those was the Austrian Open anyway. But he's a well-rounded individual, and he's been there and done everything. He's made plenty of major cuts, 2 top 15s in the PGA Championship, etc. So got a really good stock. Enough of the past. He's made 3 straight cuts, which is, which rings bells for me when you see a veteran doing something like that. He ranked inside the top 9 in both approach and tee screen last weekend. And I really do just think he's a week away with his putter from really contending. I know we say that an awful lot, but when they're 150 to 1, I think you can. This event started in 2007. He's missed 1 renewal in that time. So he's had a 2nd and a 12th in that time. He was the 36th hole leader when he was 12th. He's got 2 more top 30s. So whilst he hasn't got it's not like he plays well here every year. He has played well. He's peaked with a 2nd place finish. He's been the 36th hole leader and finished 12th. He's got 2 top 30s. So that he can play well when he's in form. He is in form. His ball striking's been pretty good for basically a month now, and he's actually like 96th, I think it is, in the DP World Tour rankings, which is a lot higher than I thought. Like when I think about those guys that are around the 100 and odd mark, like I'm surprised he's higher than Paratore. I'm surprised he's higher than Van Driel. I'm surprised he's higher than others like that. So he's obviously been doing a little bit more than we thought. He then is in the position where he can actually just boost himself up into a better position, potentially get himself into that kind of DP World Tour Championship, right? And that's massive. So I think for me, Mark Warren, a little bit like Tom Lewis, he's kind of got to reinvent himself, but he's different stage of his life, 10 years on. But like, I think he's got another chance to kind of have another real go at it. I think of people like Richie Ramsey. I think of people like Oliver Wilson who've gone and won this season. That's what Mark Warren can do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I echo that. It's just something where of trending form, of popping, and his distance isn't the same as what it used to be, but just enough that you think that, of course, success and a good number, right? Like it's just kind of, and he's like somebody not that I would necessarily say like trust in contention, but like finds first pages of leaderboards out of nowhere multiple times a year, right? And like those guys just always kind of pique an interest when you're looking at triple digits on that.
And I think you say you pull back a little bit because you're like me. You don't want to say you trust him after what I've said, in the sense that he made a career of going close and not kind of sealing the line and probably should have won more. But he's also someone that has done it 3 times, and this is full of a field that people that haven't done it at all, right? So I think in that sense, he's got things to lean on.
Yeah, 100%. I was close. Man, I almost wanted to get back on Sammy Valimaki. They're giving good numbers, man, on Sammy, and he can hit it and he can putt it. Not going to get there still in this range. I'm going to go deep, Tom. I'm going to close this out with a long shot here. I believe the longest odds out on our guy, are 422-1. Let's see, top 20 numbers. We got a 10-1 out there, which is kind of more my fancy. But if I think of golfers who, again, hit it and play the game in the way that I kind of imagine myself wanting to align with, this golfer is there from a distance perspective. Short game rarely kind of aligns with what I would like. But did you notice who kind of showed themselves in the leaderboard? It was an old friend of mine last week. You might not get this right. Now, I think he had the round of the day, the second best round of the day on Friday. I think he shot 64 on Friday last week. And he's got a 21st place finish here, 4 rounds in the 70s. And that was his better year. He's kind of fallen off in that sense. But I think that kind of shows on what he's like.
Is it Hugo Leone?
It's Hugo Leone, Tom. Hugo, I mean, he shot a 76 on Sunday, and he was inside the top 20 last week going into that final round. You see that out of Hugo. You see what he did. And if you can go by that. I think he was in, let's see, I think it was third. Yeah, third after 36 holes. Opens with a 70 and then goes 64-70 to put himself in 16th after 54. Terrible Sunday. Absolutely pitiful Sunday. Yeah. In running, though, if you kind of piece through some of those data, he was solid off the tee. He was really good approach, especially on that Friday. Like that Friday, I think he led the field or was maybe second in the field on that Friday. And again, maybe this is Homer by me to just like go into somebody that I think highly of, but peak Hugo Leone is somebody I'd be backing at this course every single time. And at 420-1, like I loved what I saw last week, and I'm ready to get hurt again by Hugo.
So he was top 10 on the first day in strokes gained approach, led the field on day 2, and then he was 61st on day 3 and dead last basically on Sunday of his irons. So he lost his irons over the weekend. What do you take from that? I would take the positives at 400-1 because there's not many golfers at 400-1 that led the field and approach at any point in any recent rounds, right? He was solid off the tee, gained strokes every round last week. Is he a big distance guy?
So he used to be. I mean, so if I looked at his like, he gained strongly over the field of Valderrama. He was positive to the field last week at Mallorca. 5 of his last 6 events, he's been positive to the field on distance. If I go back to like when did he play great here? That would have been 2019.
Yeah.
So he was that year, every event he played, he was gaining distance on the field. I mean, that year was great from him, right? I think he had four top 10 finishes that week, and then the 17th here. So like, a lot more of form of it. But like another one that I look to and I think of in this manner is like the Czech Masters. Czech Masters was always an event where distance. I mean, Peters, has eaten up the Czech Masters. Lewis has played well on Czech Masters too, I
Yep.
believe, right? And it was like one of those events where it was just distance, and you got to score with it, you got a ball strike, and that's where Hugo was really there. So I think overall, for me, that's kind of just a strong look. Uh, so definitely can go with confidence at 420 to one, right?
So I wonder what these, because on day two in the in running stats on driving distance, basically everybody was Rory McIlroy off the tee. So I wonder if they might be a little bit wrong, because it says
Okay,
that he said that he shot 200. He averaged 258 yards on day one. Then he averaged 356 on day two, 291 on day three, 311 on day four. So I
okay,
feel like every other round is potentially possible. I feel like the wind could have, maybe the wind, it was just up on Friday and it helped. I don't know, but yeah, I think he's a great guy to be on.
perfect. With that, we'll kind of round ourselves out here, and if we can review our betting cards, Tom, you from the top.
Yeah, so Eddie Pepperell for me, really love that kind of 35 to 1 number that you mentioned. 50 to 1 on Tom Lewis. I will go with Nicholas Norgard Moller. I think was he 50 to 1 as well?
Let's see, Norgard Muller 50 to 1.
Yeah.
Yes,
And then Mark Warren at 150 to 1 for me.
perfect. So for me, Joaquin Loggren at 40 to 1. Gavin Green, shortest he is, here, longest he is 45 to 1. Here, Tapio Pokanen, 55 to 1. Lucas Nemec, 80 to 1. And then Mike Lorenzo Vera, 150 to 1. Mark Warren, right there with you, 150 to 1 as well. And then Hugo Leon. There might even be a 500 out here on Hugo. So we'll see if we can find at least a 400 plus on Hugo. We'll top 20 that with him too. Um, Programming note: next week there's not a DP World Tour event. Week off, and then we're back in South Africa, and then we finish the year out. Finish the last, I guess, event of this, not calendar year, but this season, the DP World Tour.
Yeah.
Kick it off again after that. So thank you, Tom, always as well. Let's hit a 150 to 1 winner together. I would love
It's
that.
easy, right? Let's just do that.
Yes. Yes. Awesome. Well, we appreciate you guys as always, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks. Thanks again.